ever since the beginning of time, teenage girls have been getting pregnant.
All of them were supposed to have kids. Like, that's when you had kids.
That's my point, okay?
I'm worried that we have turned sexual assault into such a wide, broad category that it's losing its meaning.
This is the worst one yet, I think. This somehow manages to be more disturbing than, books that are pushing transgenderism and bisexuality and all that kind of stuff. Those books are bad too, but don't get me wrong, but this one disturbs me on a deeper level. That I used racially insensitive humor, that I told inappropriate jokes, that I engaged in lots of offensive activities. All of that, of course, is true.
Are grown men who he allegedly lured into bed and then had sex with. But as a grown man, if you let another man lure you into bed and then you willingly, with no resistance, engage in sex acts with him, does that belong in the same category as the 12-year-old kids who are raped by men twice their size?
What a brat this kid is. This kid is awful. I cannot imagine what my dad's reaction would have been. It would not have been pleasant, I can tell you. They also accused me of physically abusing our radio interns by tasing one of them as a joke. That's also true. And I submit, still funny, in the sense that I force them to do things they don't want to do. The major problem here is that the book explicitly sexualizes physical contact between family members. But the left is not satisfied to merely accuse me of racism, terrorism, political extremism, workplace violence. They're also absurdly claiming that I advocated child brides.
So what I'm saying is that the problem is not per se teenage pregnancy, it's unwed pregnancy. That's the problem in society. It's only problematic when you are not married and you don't have the man there.
In the past, teen pregnancy wasn't considered a problem because people got married younger. Let me tell you something. I violate my kids' consent all the time. I do not apologize. I wouldn't apologize to you soulless parasites if I had a gun to my head.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to a new video. I hope you don't mind an audio only recording today, but I've got a busy week and this is the best I can do. I'm so sorry. Now, Matt Walsh is someone that I haven't spoken about since I think the very first year on my channel, and honestly, I barely remember making that video now. I think he'd written some blog posts at the time about how women owe men respect for merely existing, and that definition of respect was dodgy as hell, and it was a typical women bow down to men because they're better than you sort of message. I have been considering coming back to him for years, but I just haven't got around to it for God knows what reason. But recently I watched a video by Ashley Taylor covering Paul and Morgan, and in the opening she very briefly showed some screenshots of Matt Walsh being creepy, so I just knew I had to go and look this up for myself. And what I saw was shocking, so I decided to talk about it. Now, at least one of these videos is a little old, it's from about 6 years ago, however the others are more recent. And yeah, there's just a lot to address here. Matt Walsh has some really concerning opinions around children and consent. Let's start with his video titled "We Need to Reclaim Sexual Morality," which that title alone is a red flag, isn't it?
So obviously sexual abuse has been in the news quite a bit recently with all the things going on in Hollywood and other industries and then the Catholic Church. And now there is, it seems like every other week there's another story. This time it's Asia Argento, the Italian model and actress who was one of the original Me Too crusaders and who now stands accused of sexual assault herself.
So while this clip may be 6 years old, it's crazy that nothing has changed. It was literally just a few months back that I was talking about how so many massive celebrities and influencers and YouTubers and people in general are still being accused of sexual assault, domestic violence, and so on a regular basis. The story that he's talking about here is of a woman who was assaulted by Harvey Weinstein and then went on to sleep with a 17-year-old boy when she was 37. I say sleep with in quotes because no, when they're a minor and you're an adult, it is rape. I think, if anything, this just shows how dangerous not breaking the cycle of abuse is.
And she should face the legal penalties because a crime is a crime. Now, let me tell you my concern. This is my concern, and I've talked about this before, but I want to go back to it because I think it's such an important concept, and it's an issue that I think we need to work out. This is what I'm worried about. I'm worried that we have turned sexual assault into such a wide, broad category that it's losing its meaning. And in the process, actual cases of rape and assault are trivialized, deprived of significance, because the word is used so often and often to describe things that really don't qualify.
So I'm sure he'll give us some dodgy reasoning as to why here, but it seems like an odd segue to go from let's talk about a 37-year-old adult sexually assaulting a 17-year-old minor to, but it's not really rape, is it? Because yes, it is. A child is unable to consent, and when you have a 17-year-old with another 17-year-old, maybe they are able to consent, that's fine. But when you have a 17-year-old with an actual adult and there is such a vast age difference of 20 years, and you have the power dynamics at play where, like, essentially she was like an older, powerful figure in the industry that he wanted to work in, like, definitely not able to consent. Like, that's just a fact. Now, I understand different countries have different ages of consent in terms of law and legality. In the UK, it's 16. In some American states, it's 16, 17, 18, sometimes with caveats. In some countries, it's as low as 14. But even if the legal age of consent where this happened was 16, and it wasn't, that's generally meant for 16-year-olds to be figuring out their sexuality with their peers. Other 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds and stuff, you know? It's not for adults 20 years older than them to take advantage. That is predatory behaviour. And I think he's right to some extent that our definitions of what sexual assault or rape has absolutely changed and expanded over the years. But I only think that's a good thing, because it's changed as our understanding of consent has changed. It wasn't until 1991 in the UK that marital rape became illegal. Before that, it was completely acceptable for a man to rape his wife. Somehow, the minute you signed a marriage contract, your body wasn't yours anymore, but only if you were a woman. It's only in recent years that in many countries the legal definition of rape has been changed to include the rape of men. Before that, legally, it wasn't possible to rape a man, which we know is nonsense. We've reviewed age of consent laws and what it means to give informed affirmative consent. These definitions have changed, and it's only a good thing.
When we talk about the sexual assault problem, it seems like there are many different types of situations that get kind of lumped into it. It's one of the reasons why I don't like the Me Too. Once you start putting a slogan, once you take an issue, a really serious issue like sexual assault, and you put a slogan on top of it, Me Too, that's the slogan. Well, then it simplifies things way too much.
I have to ask Matt, is that the reason you don't like it? Or is it because it was finally a situation where women all came together and supported each other and finally felt safe enough to speak out and share their own stories and experiences? The hashtag wasn't about oversimplifying or making it cool. It was about bringing something that had been hidden for decades and ran so deep in the system. It's about bringing it to the surface. It was about giving survivors a safe space to come together. Of course, this didn't work in practice because people still re-victimized them, but that was the intention. Meenakshi Gigi Durham wrote in her book, Me Too, The Impact of Rape Culture in the Media, that the media are in fact quite literally sites of sexual violence. For decades, sexual harassment and assault had been routinized and concealed in corporate media workplaces. Acts of rape had been committed in newsrooms, on film sets, in media executives' hotel rooms. The strategies used by many media corporations to conceal and thereby enable serial sexual assaults show that sexual violence is systemic violence, embedded in structures of workplaces and buttressed by other institutional mechanisms such as legal processes and human resource policies. In the wake of hashtag MeToo, it has become increasingly apparent that these mechanisms and structures are deeply entrenched in a variety of social institutions and in most countries and cultures. The media industries are not unique, but they have awakened a realization that workplaces harbour a rape culture, a culture that not only facilitates rape, but perhaps most damningly silences its survivors. Rape culture as a concept has become highly visible in the Me Too movement. It is a hotly contested term and idea which refers basically to a complex of beliefs that encourages male sexual aggression and supports violence against women, leading to the acceptance of rape as a normal part of life. She goes on to write, as the second-wave feminist scholar Susan Griffin pointed out, the fact that rape is against the law should not be considered proof that rape is not in fact encouraged as part of our culture. The concept of rape culture as a framework has been validated by the #MeToo hashtag and its aftermath. The millions of tweets and social media discourses swiftly exposed the pervasiveness of sexual violence in most societies. In doing so, they engage with rape culture in myriad ways, at once recognizing, resisting, and re-evaluating the concept from multiple perspectives. So to disagree with Matt, I don't think the use of this hashtag resulted in an oversimplification at all, but quite the opposite. It showed us just how complex and widespread and normal this problem was and continues to be to this day. And more than this, I think when a man who, to the best of my knowledge and public knowledge, has never personally been the victim of sexual assault, starts sitting there trying to tell other people that their sexual assault isn't as bad as another kind of sexual assault, or this experience wasn't like real sexual assault, that becomes so damn problematic, because different kinds of assaults and different experiences affect different people in different ways. And the important thing isn't to tell them how they feel or tell them that the crime committed against them wasn't as serious as another crime. The important thing is that we listen to victims and survivors about their experience and don't try and tell them how serious what happened to them was or how not serious it was. We don't tell them how to feel, you know? We don't belittle their experiences and their emotions about those experiences.
Although they all get lumped into the same category, if we do have to put them in categories, it seems like there are, broadly speaking, really two different categories. So in Hollywood, there are the stories of women being forcibly raped, or threatened if they don't go along with something. And there are the kind of stories you hear about Kevin Spacey, right, where he's going around groping and fondling people against their will. He's forcing himself on 14-year-old kids and so forth. You have situations like with Larry Nassar, where he molested hundreds of kids under the guise of performing medical procedures and that kind of thing. And then obviously you have the Catholic Church and the terrible stories of children being raped by priests. And all of these stories are, provided they're true, of course, they're clear-cut cases of rape and abuse. Nobody disputes that. Okay, that's rape, abuse, assault. And in all of those situations, if there was any justice in America, everybody involved, if they're found guilty, they'd all be going to prison forever. Even though that has only happened very rarely, you know, in these situations. But then you have this other category, which gets thrown in and conflated with all the other ones I just mentioned. So here you have the cases in Hollywood where actresses willingly have sexual relationships with powerful men, sometimes for years. Asia Argento herself, I believe, she was in a sexual relationship ongoing with Harvey Weinstein for like 5 years. She kept going back and engaging in this, you know, in this stuff with him. And they do this for the sake of movie roles and so on. And for more, you know, power and clout in the industry. And then years later, after getting what they want out of it, they claim that they were being assaulted the entire time.
This actually makes me angry because it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of what sexual assault is. Matt doesn't seem to realize that grooming is absolutely a thing. Coercive control is absolutely a thing. Plenty of abusers and groomers and rapists make their victims think that they're in love with them or control them in other ways, so they keep going back. That doesn't mean they're consenting. And just because abuse is ongoing and a person has no means to escape, perhaps because someone's threatening them violently, or manipulating them emotionally, or controlling them economically, or having control over their career, they'll be forced into sexual acts they're unwilling to consent to, but they feel they have to do it. This is still rape. Look at the allegations against Neil Gaiman. That's a perfect example of this. It's not lesser rape or less serious because it happened multiple times. It's not less serious because the women got career roles out of it, when in reality, they should have that should have never been something they had to bargain with to begin with. It's not less serious just because Matt doesn't understand how grooming works. This actually makes me so damn angry. Rape and sexual assault is an inherently violent act, but it doesn't always look violent. It doesn't always mean using physical force. Sometimes it involves emotional manipulation, bribery, using subtle fear as a coercion tactic. But at the end of the day, if there's no consent, then it is rape. End of story.
In the Catholic Church, you have some cases where, like cases involving Cardinal McCarrick. You hear about Cardinal McCarrick and the controversy surrounding him. Now, there are accusations that he molested children. So, that's in that category. But then a lot of the accusations you hear about McCarrick and also with other, some of these other things as well, these are, in some cases, he's having sex with seminarians. These are grown men who he allegedly lured into bed and then had sex with. But as a grown man, if you let another man lure you into bed and then you willingly, with no resistance, engage in sex acts with him, does that belong in the same category as the 12-year-old kids who are raped by men twice their size?
I don't personally know about this case, but I will say if you have to use the word lure to describe how the sexual activity happened in the first place, then that suggests to me that, yeah, they weren't consenting, they didn't want it, they had to be forced or convinced into it, and therefore, yes, it is rape. This goes beyond victim blaming, and it is so damn dangerous. Matt Walsh is a perfect example of how ignorance and stupidity can be so damn harmful.
Then you also have the accusations against Asia Argento, where a guy at 17, legal age, in almost every state in the union, willingly has sex with this 100-pound Italian model, making no effort to leave the room or leave the situation. Then he comes back, blackmails her, demands money for it, and gets paid. And now he says he was traumatized by his willing participation in sex acts with a woman when he was a few months away from his 18th birthday. Does that belong in the same category as a woman or a child who gets pinned down and raped by a sex predator?
Well, actually, yes, I would say that a 37-year-old adult having sex with a 17-year-old is a sex predator who is raping. Yes, I would use those words and definitions. And yeah, as I discussed in one of my most recent videos, it's perfectly normal for teenagers to have crushes on older adults. That is a part of growing up. But it is the adult's responsibility to not take advantage of that and not sexually abuse a child, because when there's an age gap that big, and therefore a power imbalance that big, they are unable to give informed consent. And many of these kids don't know that what's happening to them is rape or assault at the time. It's not until later, when they've had time to mature and process it, that they realize. I spoke a lot in a recent video about Sonia Orchard's book Groomed, in which she tells her own story of being groomed and raped by a 26-year-old man when she was just 15. And for years, she didn't realize there was anything even wrong in their relationship. It wasn't until she was in her 40s that she was like, oh crap, like, this was really bad, this was really messed up. However, she'd been living with having major trauma responses for years and just hadn't pieced together what the cause of it was. It had been affecting her emotionally and physically and her relationships without her even realizing it. Matt Walsh is trying to invoke what Sonia refers to as this grey zone to excuse adults' predatory behaviour towards minors. Sonia writes in her book that the age at which children become adults is not clear-cut. It's a gradual process, which will vary between cultures and between individuals. Some individuals may never become fully independent and may remain on the lookout for and ready to attach to carers throughout their lives. What is clear, though, is that while a person is dependent, that is needing care and resources from another in order to survive, they will be hyper alert to the presence of potential carers and ready to attach to them if triggered with attachment behaviours. And this will be especially true if they are lacking a stable adult attachment, as she was as a teenager. Age of consent laws are inherently arbitrary, and yet drawing a line to protect young people is necessary. But what makes a sexual act damaging enough to be illegal is highly contested, and this applies especially to the question of age. When does a child stop being a child? When do they become capable of making such a monumental decision as consenting to sex with an adult? Was I less damaged by what happened to me in the final months of my relationship with S after I turned 16 than what took place in the first 7 months? The grey zone doesn't do teenagers any favours, she writes, with societal attitudes often ending up at the extremes of either being puritanical or unconcerned and somewhat accepting. Both approaches leave girls woefully unprotected when they need protection the most. At the age of 15, a girl enters a 5-year danger zone for sexual assault. Girls 15 to 19 years of age are victims of sexual assault at 9.3 times the rate as all people 15 years old and above. It's a statistic that should cause far greater alarm than it does. And I'd argue there's even a similar issue for young boys of this age as well, who are taught that it's cool to be with an older woman. It'll make them an alpha, a stud, whatever slang the kids use these days. And yet those women who prey on teenage victims, and yet those older women who prey on teenage boys are still predators. These are young boys literally being socialized into being victims, and it's not okay. The fact that the legal age of consent is so arbitrary is the issue here. Matt Walsh hears it's 14 here, it's 16 here, it's 18 here, and therefore any of that must be okay. Whereas I hear it's 14 here, 16 here, 18 here, and whatever, and therefore all of those young ages and a little buffer zone afterwards, they need protecting. And grown adults of 25 and above should absolutely be staying away from them and not being predatory towards them, and allow kids time to figure out their sexuality with their peers at their own pace and not be creeped on by adults. I personally find Matt's stance incredibly concerning, because if he can justify, well, if 18 is okay, then 17 must be okay, and if it's 16 in some areas and that's okay, then just how far is he going to go with that, really?
And then you have cases on college campuses where we're told now, drunk sex is rape. That's what we're told now. Because if you're drunk, you can't consent, so drunk sex is automatically rape.
Again, this is just a misunderstanding. We're not told that. We're told that too drunk to consent is rape. If a person is drunk to the point of impairment, struggling to stand, struggling to speak, unable to advocate for themselves, then they cannot give informed consent to sexual activity. I find a good rule of thumb if you're in that kind of situation is, if you're unable to tell how drunk your partner is, or, you're unable to tell if they're able to consent, just don't do it. It's that simple. Wait until they sober up, and if you two still want to, great, go for it. And if they don't, then you move on. No regrets, no issues, no risk of rape. The only person oversimplifying things here is Matt.
Of inappropriate language or conversations in a work environment where a man is accused of hitting on women or trying to initiate relationships, maybe unsuccessfully, or making rude comments. And all of these also get lumped in and are stuffed under the kind of Me Too umbrella.
Yeah, because harassment is serious and a person should be able to do their job without facing it. How is that controversial? How is that confusing?
Here's the problem, I think. This is where this comes from. This is where the trouble comes. We have, as a culture, removed all moral boundaries from sex. We have discarded all notions of sexual morality except for consent. That is the one moral rule that we have maintained when it comes to sex.
And yeah, because it's a pretty damn important one.
Consent is the only moral rule that we still observe with sex. And so when an immoral sexual encounter occurs, even if it wasn't rape or assault, we have no language with which to describe it. I think there are many cases where where there's some sort of sexual encounter, and we all instinctively recognize that it was immoral, that there's something wrong with it. But because we've gotten rid of the whole idea of sexual morality, we just have no way to describe it. We don't know what to do with it. And so we take the one sexual moral rule that we still have and we apply it to that situation because it's all we've got, even if it's not appropriate in that case. Because we have no basis for condemning any sexual encounter unless the sexual encounter was non-consensual.
This is a nonsense word salad. Like, what is he even on about here? And what is an immoral sex act? Well, we know what he probably thinks it is, but isn't it crazy how in his mind, like, premarital sex is more immoral than an adult raping a child? That's absolutely wild. It sounds like he's trying to do mental gymnastics to avoid calling a lack of consent what it is. A lack of consent.
It's like, as long as they're consenting adults who choose to do this thing, then it must be okay. But the reality is that there's a lot of bad sex. There's a lot of immoral sex. There's a lot of disordered, gross, harmful sex that is nonetheless consensual. All of the cases that I mentioned, they're all immoral, bad, gross, harmful. But they're not all rape.
Yeah, they are. All the examples he's given in this video, all the ones we've looked at, are absolutely rape. And I don't doubt he's going to try and conflate it to something like, I don't know, gay sex or polyamory or just premarital sex or whatever. But if he's seriously going to try and conflate, for example, two 30-year-old women sleeping together as being the same and as immoral and dangerous and harmful as a 37-year-old adult taking advantage of a 17-year-old child that they work with, or a boss harassing their employee or whatever, like, then it's not only stupid, but incredibly offensive.
The only time that it's not consent, the only time when willing participation is not consent, is when there is something that precludes the person from being able to actually willingly consent, or when their consent is coerced. So if there are threats or something involved, then obviously that's not consent. That's not willing participation. You're not willing. It is, when you're coerced into doing something, that's not willing participation. Or if we're talking about someone who is at an age where they don't possess the mental capacity to consent, or to understand what sex is and what the ramifications of it are.
So you mean like if someone's holding a job role over your head, or if someone is emotionally manipulating you, or if a person is drunk and incapacitated, or if a person is underage, no?
Indeed, a whole vast category of consensual yet wrong sex. And we need to acknowledge that and start talking about that rather than trying to make everything into assault and rape. Now, consensual yet wrong sex, that includes a lot of different things. This is a category where, you have sex that's transactional. Sex where it's not respecting of human dignity.
No respecting of human dignity. So you mean rape? I don't think Matt realizes that you can revoke consent at any time. If you feel you're being treated badly in the moment and you decide you don't want to do this anymore and they carry on, that's rape because you have revoked consent. I don't think anyone would be genuinely treated as subhuman and still be consenting, no? And I don't mean like role play or you've agreed that they're going to say this or do this or what. I mean like if you're actually treated subhuman, like I don't think you're still going to be consenting to sex with them, are you? Anyway, let's move on. A few years later, Matt Walsh was back with his anti-consent rants. This time he's mad that there are children's books teaching kids about consent. And now I'll just say this. Teaching kids about consent is huge. It is so damn important. And it is not, unlike Matt wants to say, a sexual thing. It is a bodily autonomy thing. Teaching them that they can say no, that they don't need to do things they don't want to, teaching them that they never have to hug or kiss someone they don't want to, teaching them what bad touches are so they can be aware of predators and tell trusted adults about them. That is massively important in both a child's development and just keeping them safe, right? But Matt Walsh disagrees, and he's mad that there's a book teaching kids to be safe.
We're going to read this whole thing. It's pretty short, and I'll read the whole thing, and then I'll offer my review. So let's get into it. This is called C is for Consent. And this is, it says ages, this is for ages 0 and plus. So if you have a 0-year-old child, they could read this and up from there. I mean, it's a board book, it's short. So this is really for kids probably, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old.
Well, yeah, because I don't think your kid is ever too young for safeguarding to start, right?
All right. It says, it's time for a party with family and friends. And you see, of course, there we've got the interracial gay couple. We've got the interracial disabled couple. Well, one member of the couple's disabled. You got to get all the representation there. And I don't see any furries. I don't see anyone who's apparently transsexual or even transgender or pansexual. So that's a problem. But
and how would you know, Matt? Because trans people and pansexual people look just like everyone else. And of course he's mad that people of different races exist. It's giving me slightly racist Paul from Paul and Morgan, you know? But it's like, I watch this clip and I'm like, tell me all your friends are straight, cis, and white without telling me all your friends are straight, cis, and white, you know? Like, oh God, his parties must be boring.
We'll keep going. Grandma wants a hug, but Finn isn't in the mood. That's okay, says Dad. You don't have to give hugs if you don't want to. Grandpa leans down to kiss Finn. Mom says, please ask for consent first. Grandpa asks, may I kiss you on the cheek? Finn replies, yes, you may. Auntie and Uncle want Finn to sit with them. Come sit on my lap. No, you have to sit on my lap. Finn says, no, thank you. My parents say I don't have to sit on anyone's lap if I don't feel like it.
Yeah, I see absolutely no issues with this book. This is great.
What a brat this kid is.
And sorry, like, because he doesn't want random people touching him. No. Wow. Oh, God. This is absolutely disgusting from Matt. Like, he feels like the kind of man who would say to a random woman, give me a hug. Go on, just give me a hug. No, why won't you hug me, you bitch? Like, I'm getting the same vibes here. He clearly doesn't respect other people's boundaries.
Finn is happy to see his best friend, Rue. He asks, may I hold your hand? It is okay for you to say no. Rue replies, yes, you may hold my hand. Thank you for asking first. And that's it. That's the end of the whole story. Okay. Then there are discussion questions at the end, which we won't get into. Well, so that actually is, somewhat surprisingly, this is the worst one yet, I think. This somehow manages to be more disturbing than, books that are pushing transgenderism and bisexuality and all that kind of stuff. Those books are bad too, but don't get me wrong, but this one disturbs me on a deeper level.
Somehow it doesn't surprise me that the man who in the past has been talking about how it's not really rape to sleep with minors is somehow disturbed by teaching kids about bodily autonomy and consent, you know? The only disturbing thing here is Matt's reaction. Everyone in this book was polite and friendly and kind and respectful, and I love that. There are no issues here with the book. The issues are with Matt's response.
This kid is awful. I mean, this is what happens when you have permissive hippie parents. I can't imagine if I was a little kid, if I was like 6 years old and my grandmother came to visit and said, hey, give me a hug. And I said, nah, I don't feel like it, Granny.
Yeah, God forbid a kid have boundaries. That's not awful, that's just human. And there's more than one way to show affection towards someone, and it's important to teach kids that they get to decide how they do it.
I said, nah, I don't feel like it, Granny. I cannot imagine what my dad's reaction would have been. It would not have been pleasant, I can tell you.
Yeah, see, this is terrifying. Slapping a kid because he doesn't want to be touched? Like, are you trying to set your kid up to be abused? Because that is what could very easily happen here. Not to mention that the slap in the first place is abusive as hell. Like, this whole video is so damn terrifying, and it just gets worse.
My reaction with my own kids wouldn't be pleasant in that situation. Yes, I tell them. I guess let me tell you something. I violate my kids' consent all the time in the sense that I force them to do things they don't want to do. Sit down and study! That's much of the day, in fact.
I'm telling you, this man is an actual monster. I don't need to tell you why this is bad, right? But this is how you end up with A, either your kids not talking to you when they're adults, or B, your kids growing up to abuse more kids who are going to abuse more kids, and so on, and the cycle of abuse will continue. Now, he may be exaggerating here to, create some controversy or whatever, because that's what he does, but there's a huge difference between, oh no, you don't want to do the dishes, but it's your responsibility and you have to do it to learn how to do this stuff, and oh no, you don't want your personal space being invaded? Screw it. You need to let an adult invade your personal space and touch you without consent or I'll hit you. And this is teaching you to be a people pleaser and, do all this despite your discomfort. And this is going to teach you how to not say no to predators.
But The major problem here is that the book explicitly sexualizes physical contact between family members.
No, it doesn't. Did we even read the same book? It's like Matt Walsh has like no reading comprehension skills. What the hell does sexual contact look like to you, Matt? And if it's this, then I pity your wife even more than I already did. This book has absolutely nothing to do with sexual contact. It is purely about physical touch, physical contact, and teaching kids that their body is their own and it's up to them who they let in that space. I did cut out a bit of video here where Matt, like just for time, where Matt said he tells his kids that they have to hug family members because it's polite. And sadly, we've seen abusers take advantage of this, like, you know, telling kids that they have to let themselves be touched because it's the polite thing to do and so on. Like, these teachings literally set kids up to be hurt and abused by people. But if you teach a kid that any touch needs to be the choice of everyone involved, then you're actually giving them the tools to protect themselves, both in regular and potentially predatory situations. Like, but honestly, I see nothing about this book that was sexualizing these interactions. Consent is not just a sexual thing. It's about setting your own boundaries and respecting other people's boundaries. If I invite a friend over to my house and we talk about a book and I say, oh, would you like to borrow this book? I'm consenting for them to take it. If they come over to my house and take one of my books without asking, I'm not consenting to that, and that is theft. Does Matt Walsh want to say that by giving that example I'm sexualizing books now? The definition of consent, according to Chanel Contos, is simply consent means permission for something to happen. Legally, consent means to agree to something with choice. Consent can be as simple as empathy. Consent is being present, being free, being able to have a say. Consent is an emotion. Consent is something that can be perceived and understood. Consent is a mental task. Consent is a feeling.
I mean, this author who is it? Eleanor Morrison. He, his, her, whoever's, they're taking their own, I don't want to misgender them. Whoever it is, they're taking their own complex and projecting it onto everyone else. I don't know what's going on with you, that you view a hug from an aunt or a grandfather as potentially sexual in nature, but it's something you should be talking to a therapist about. You don't write it into a children's book.
Again, the only one sexualizing anything here is Matt. The level of projection here is completely wild.
Let's take the family dynamic out of it for a second, just for a moment, because I don't want to dwell on that. It's too disturbing. And let's pretend that we're talking about just some dude and a girl, and they're not related. Even in that context, the idea that verbal consent should precede every physical interaction is asinine. I mean, my wife would look at me like a maniac if we were walking somewhere down the sidewalk or something, and I said, "Excuse me.
May I have consent to hold your hand? Requesting permission to initiate physical interaction."
Permission granted. You may maintain physical contact for 75 seconds.
Thank you, ma'am.
That's what they...
He's being so damn obtuse here because no one is saying that it has to be like that for every single interaction, every single time. Usually as you get to know someone, you can find ways to like kind of subtly ask the consent without verbalizing it. But sometimes when it's someone new or it's a stranger, like, you do want to verbalize it. So like, say when I meet fans in public, I always say to them like, oh, are you comfortable with a hug? And some say yes and some say no, and you respect their answer. And I think because they're strangers to me, it's important to ask and like, you know, get that verbal confirmation before you go in for a hug and touch someone. But often with my friends who I've known for years, we just sort of signal to each other for a hug with like, you know, slight raise of your arms when you see them. And if you want a hug, you reciprocate. And you go in and you have a great hug. And sometimes if you don't want a hug, like if I've been traveling and I'm feeling a bit gross, I'll be like, oh, not right now. I'm a bit, you know, warm and gross, like, and then you don't hug. That's still asking for consent and communicating consent. And it's just, oh. No one is saying you have to verbally and explicitly ask for consent with every interaction, but it is important to establish boundaries with people and listen to them when they communicate one with you, and you find ways to check in on people. Even with my dog, Kyra, there are ways to practice communicating consent, right? So if I put my hand out to her and let her come to me, that's a way of me asking if she wants snuggles and her way of consenting to them. Sometimes I go in and I give her a kiss on the cheek and then I pull back. And if she's enjoying the physical contact and those kisses, then she'll give me a little kiss back and then I go in for another kiss and she gives me one. And it's like, you know, we kiss each other on the cheek and it's like reciprocal and that's us giving consent. If she's not into it, then she'll turn her head away from me and I know to back up and give her space and not get in her face. You know what I mean? These are all non-verbal ways of communicating consent. And again, let me clarify before Matt gets creepy. These are non-sexual boundaries, non-sexual physical contact, non-sexual consent issues. Don't sexualize my dog, yeah? So anyway, that's all stupid. Now, if this wasn't bad enough, there's another audio-only clip of him, which has been posted online several times, talking about how it's okay to impregnate 16-year-old girls and have sex with them, but the way to get around it is if you marry them afterwards. He claims this is from a radio show he did in Delaware. I think it was back in like 2009-ish. Yeah, have a listen.
It is not. In fact, ever since the beginning of time, teenage girls have been getting pregnant. It used to be more common. The peak, ever since they started keeping records of these things, which they only started doing recently, like in the 20th century, but ever since they started keeping records, in 1957 was the peak for teenage pregnancy. 1957.
Yeah, and you know what happened to those pregnant teenagers a lot of the time? A lot of them died in childbirth. The body of a teenager is not designed for pregnancy and childbirth. Just because they may start ovulating, that does not mean their body is strong enough or developed enough to carry a pregnancy. And it definitely does not mean she's mature enough to become a parent.
All of them were supposed to have kids. Like, that's when you had kids.
That's my point, okay? So to all of a sudden act like this phenomenon of girls getting pregnant at a young age that we consider young, 16 or 17, to act like it's a new thing is ridiculous. It's always been that way.
Yeah, but nowadays we're aware of the harm it causes to both mother and baby, and so we want to prevent it from happening. No one is saying it's never happened before, but we are saying we've become more aware of how harmful it is over the last 20, 30 years or so.
Even biologically, and this is me just stating, I'm going to start by just stating facts. So fact number one, it's not a new phenomenon. Fact number two, in fact, it's a phenomenon that was more common earlier in history, and for, the first 6,000 to 10,000 years of human existence, it was a normal thing. Fact three, girls between the ages of like 17 and 24 is when they're technically most fertile.
Yeah.
Okay? That's biological.
Yeah, this is absolutely not true of 17-year-olds, like absolutely not at all. And again, this is something I also spoke about in a recent video, so let me quote Sonia Orchard's book to you again. This is a little long, but I think it's important. For those fond of evoking biology in these discussions, the justification for many men's longing for young female virgins is that a female's youth is a sign of high fertility. It's an argument that's been used for decades. Unfortunately, however, when we're talking about teenagers, it's simply untrue. A woman's fertility peaks around her early to mid-20s. When a girl first gets her period, she might not even be fertile. She may remain infertile or with low fertility for a year or two before her fertility slowly climbs. So if a male were really attracted to the most fertile partner, it should be a woman in her early to mid-20s, not one in her teens. Secondly, if we're talking about biological drives to procreate, there's a lot more involved in reproduction than simply finding a fertile heterosexual partner, especially when it comes to offspring who require so much looking after. To ensure the survival of your genes, you need to make sure not just that you have offspring, but that your offspring survive to maturity. Given how tough it is to raise humans, the ideal reproductive partner will be someone not just fertile, but also good at nurturing and providing. Again, this rules out teenagers. She goes on to write, in studies from around the world, from North America to tribal societies, it's been found that girls in their early or mid-teens statistically make poorer mothers than fully matured women, and are much more likely to be neglectful, abandoning, or even infanticidal mothers. Babies born to teenage mothers are also at greater risk of preterm birth, low birth weight, stillbirth, and neonatal death. The list of disadvantages continues. So sexual attractiveness really is related to fertility, and the male drive to impregnate fertile females, then teenage girls should be a pretty unattractive option, certainly less attractive than a mature woman. Interestingly, that's exactly what you see among chimps, and in all other primates for which there is information on male preference. Males always prefer mature adult females over fertile immature females. So why don't we see this in humans? Why are humans like a lot of these like red pill men and right wingers and whatever, they often like to like invoke evolutionary biology and be like, oh, you know, well, in the past we were made for this, and so I feel this. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, if you look at like what evolution has done to other species, they're pretty damn civilized compared to you guys. So what's your problem?
But what happened recently, and this is the fourth fact, recently in the last 30 years or so, we decided that that's way too young to start a family.
Why?
And because now
divorce rates would probably go up, and once you're that young, you can't really make sure that you know.
No, girls are no.
Because girls were getting married early, and marriages were lasting longer.
Yeah, marriages were lasting longer, but that doesn't mean happy marriages were lasting longer, or that the marriages themselves were happier. They were lasting longer because, for one thing, women in the UK couldn't have their own bank accounts before 1975, except in a few very rare circumstances if a husband or father signed off on it, and even then there were caveats. It wasn't until 1974 in America. And two, they were also lasting longer because the Divorce Reform Act wasn't introduced in the UK until 1969, and no-fault divorce wasn't brought in America until around 1969 or 1970, depending on the state. So yeah, in the past, people married teenagers, impregnated them, and those girls and women were legally unable to leave that marriage or have any resources of their own. So of course, those marriages lasted longer. But surely it tells you something that when people get the chance to leave, and they immediately do, does that not tell you that they weren't happy in those situations in the first place?
So what I'm saying is that the problem is not per se teenage pregnancy, it's unwed pregnancy. That's the problem in society. It's only problematic when you are not married and you don't have the man there to help you take care of the kids because he's a coward. And the reason why we have that now are for two reasons. Because we have in current society, we live in the age of extended adolescence.
I kind of wish the clip didn't cut off here, but that's the longest one I could find online. But to summarize, Matt Walsh thinks we should be actively impregnating and marrying teenagers. See my entire recent video about Kendra and her grooming situation as to why this is a terrible, terrible, terrible idea. I'll leave it linked in the resource document if you want to go check it out. Matt responded to this audio clip being released, along with many others, and he called it a hit piece. He said that it was okay that he said all of these things because he also mocked black people and physically abused people he worked with at the time, and today it's still funny, so we shouldn't be mad at him? I don't know how the hell he thinks this is any sort of defense, but I swear, the more I hear from this man, the less intelligent I realize he is. And I apologize for the low video quality here because I had issues downloading this one.
So I worked at the station until I was 25. For a couple of years during that period, I hosted a morning show where we often did flout the rules of political correctness, as was the custom on morning radio at the time. In their hit piece, Media Matters presents evidence that I used racially insensitive humor, that I told inappropriate jokes, that I engaged in lots of offensive activities. All of that, of course, is true. They also accused me of physically abusing our radio interns by tasing one of them as a joke. That's also true. And I submit, still funny. But there's more. Media Matters reveals that I once challenged the intern to lick the inside of a dumpster, which again is true, but the part they leave out is that afterwards we called a doctor on the air to find out what sort of diseases he might have picked up from the stunt. And from what I recall, the answer was many. Also, again, as Media Matters exposes, like any other hacky morning show at the time, we did prank calls, and some of the prank calls were offensive by current standards. Sometimes on a call, I would imitate a black man. On one occasion, I attempted to portray a man with split personalities, one of whom was black and the other white. It was very high concept sort of work, and it worked better on paper than it did in execution, I could tell you. But not all of our prank calls were racially charged. Only most of them were. But the left is not satisfied to merely accuse me of racism, terrorism, political extremism, workplace violence. They're also absurdly claiming that I advocated child brides. And for that bit of defamation, they are using another segment from over a decade ago where we discussed the issue of teen pregnancy. And I pointed out that in the past, teen pregnancy wasn't considered a problem because people got married younger. I was attempting to highlight, in an admittedly awkward and rambling way in my early 20s, riffing off the top of my head during a rock morning show to an audience of almost no one at the time, the fact that unwed pregnancy is a core problem that plagues our society, and it's still a problem even when the unwed pregnant person is an adult. So no matter the age, I argued at the time, pregnancies become a crisis when they happen outside of marriage without a stable family structure in place to care for the child.
You weren't talking about adults, were you, Matt? You were literally talking about teenagers. You provided the context. You gave the context.
At its core, it's a rather uncontroversial historical observation, but the left has latched on to this point from years ago and tried to use it to flip the groomer label around on me, accusing me of, quote, promoting teen pregnancy and even child rape, as some of the libelous statements would have it.
Yeah, I and other people don't need to accuse him of anything. His own words tell you everything you need to know. All I've done here is play his words back to you and refute them. Like, I'll let you make up your own mind about what they mean in regards to Matt Walsh, but he's saying them himself. I'm not putting words in his mouth.
So here's my official answer, for the record. Kiss my ass. I do not apologize. In fact, by all rights, you sick freaks should be the ones apologizing to me for lying and defaming me, and doing it all because I'm trying to prevent you from sexually mutilating children. You damned monsters. You child-abusing psychopaths. I wouldn't apologize to you, soulless parasites, if I had a gun to my head. Instead, I'd rather just tell you all to piss off. I apologize for nothing. I concede nothing. I will never surrender even a single inch of ground to a pitchfork mob of degenerate morons.
Wow, Matt. What a mature response. Like, he really doesn't care who he hurts, does he? And I'm not entirely sure what he means by his critics sexually mutilating children. I think he's referring to trans teenagers getting, like, you know, gender-affirming care, therapy, sort of hormone blockers and things like that. But he's kind of forgetting that there are a lot of people, especially on his side of things, who are also and actually mutilating children. I know I'm personally a big advocate against practices like female genital mutilation, and I do a lot of fundraising for charities like Forward, who are actively fighting to prevent FGM. They are actively fighting to prevent child marriage. They are actively fighting against violence against women and children. They are linked in the source document as well if you want to check out the work they do. It's amazing, and you can donate to them. They're wonderful. I've never seen Matt Walsh do any of that. Like, I've never seen him actually fight against the mutilation of children as young as 4 years old who are having their genitals sliced and cut away in unsanitary conditions. Like, I've never seen him advocate against anything like that. Instead, I just hear him brag about him violating his kids' consent. So, if you look at his content and mine, for example, like, who's really helping and harming children here?
You know, the secret they never say out loud is that nobody is truly canceled unless they consent to it and they willingly play their assigned roles. Well, I do not consent.
I'm sorry, did you just say consent, Matt? Did you just sexualize cancel culture? That's disgusting. How dare you? Okay, anyway, on that silly little note, that is where I'm going to end today's video. I know I was covering some older stuff here, but all of it was new to me, and sometimes I think it's important to remind ourselves that stuff like this is still out there and being said, and that we can still learn from it and call people like Matt Walsh out for their harmful beliefs. And that's kind of where I want to end things today. Thank you so much for watching and listening today, whether you are watching on YouTube or listening to the audio on Spotify. I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you. If you want to go follow me on Instagram, you can. I am at Rachel Oates with a 0 instead of an O. And I'm in the middle of posting really, really cool photos over there that I took at Tramlines Festival in Sheffield. So lots of really cool bands and live music photography and some comedians and all sorts of fun stuff. And I've also got some really cool stuff that I'm doing this week that I've been posting about. So you can go see that. I also have TikTok where I'm posting short clips. I have my second channel. I've got my book coming out really, really soon. I just finished editing the audiobook last night, and I'm actually feeling good about it for once. It's taken like a year for me to get to a place where I feel good, but yeah. How you doing, Kyra? You got something you want to say? You having a little grumble? Ready for a snack? Yeah. Oh, I wish you guys could see how cute she is. She's beautiful, aren't you? You're beautiful. Anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you so much for all your time and attention today. I appreciate you a hell of a lot, and I'll see you again soon. You saying goodbye? Are you saying goodbye? All right, bye everyone.